Well, here we have the Stellan Kern AK300. This is I guess, the bottom of the range of the AK 300 series. I'm just going to start it up. I'll just hold the finger down here. This player here doesn't have a huge amount of reviews online for some reason, and there's sort of mixed reports from people who have owned it. Personally, I think it's a great player. I've had this along with the AK100 Mark II, the AK70 version 1 and version 2, AK Junior, the original AK120. I think it's on par with all of those. I currently still have the AK240, which was obviously the older, higher end, the premium Stellan Kern player from a few years ago. Personally, that player does still beat this one in terms of sound quality, I think, but it is pretty close. Technology does come a long way, but very, very similar in terms of user interface. I was actually a bit surprised when I got the AK300 because it's actually bigger than the AK240 in terms of footprint size. Didn't realise that until I'd got them side by side. So I actually like the AK240 size and footprint better than this one. This hasn't got its case on. Just wanted to. I've just sort of sold this player and I'm about to pack it in its box and send it away. It's one of those things that sometimes you just get too many players in your collection and you can't keep them. You just can't keep collecting and collecting. I get in trouble with my better half sometimes if I have too many players lying around, and it's always good to try new things. I have kept some of my favourites over time that I have reference to, all the newer ones. My favourite even today is a Calyx M. I think is one of the better players that I've ever used, but in terms of just pure sound quality. But this is much better in terms of user interface. I mean, it's very slick. You've got the simple menus. You can check what you've got. You've got for those who've used the Stellan Kern players, they're all up to the AK 300 series. They all operate pretty similarly. They've got setting screens. You've got your basic Wi-Fi. You can have tidal offline. You can pretty much once you've had one of these players, you know the interface for all of them. But it's one of those players that easy to use, fantastic sounding, can't go wrong with it. Has a bit of an unusual shape, but once you've put it in its sort of cover, then it doesn't have the sharp edges or anything that shows when it's out of its case. I actually think the player is underrated in terms of sound, because a lot of people say that the AK70 Mark II is better, or that this has a sort of a analog sound, but it's not detailed. I mean, I'm not sure whether people have actually owned this player who've made some of these comments or reviews. When I first got it, I did wonder. I wasn't that impressed. I don't normally believe in break-in, but this is one player that definitely changed its sound after a relatively short period of time. I actually purchased a second player, brand new, had it sitting alongside this one, unopened, other than to test it for the first time. I put it in my little splitter box, playing the same track, side by side, confirmed, absolutely no difference, as you'd expect. And then about a month later, after this one had probably had 50 hours use, the bass and everything definitely was a lot stronger. So the new one, I think it takes about 30 hours, and then all of a sudden there's a bit of depth or bass that seems to come out in this player. I can't explain it. I don't normally believe in that sort of effect occurring, but this has been one player where I've seen a change in the sound, and I've been able to subjectively compare it to another player, and then switching back and forth in a switching box, and then after a few hours of play on both ones, they both sound the same again. So out of the box, definitely a little bit anemic, but after a little bit of play time, it settles out and appears to be fantastic. Now, this player, if I click the folders, in this case I've only got internal storage in there, but you can see it's relatively responsive, a lot faster than some of the older players. The AK240 though is still the same sort of speed as this one. I can go into that, pick a song, and then it starts playing. So it's now playing out of the folder. So it's a relatively simple player to use, and that's what I like about the Estelle and Kern. I think they're potentially, a lot of people say they're overpriced, but if you ever have owned an Estelle and Kern player, they are, in my mind, well made, or appear to be well made. They definitely ooze quality in terms of the construction of them and the heft of them when you lift them up and carry them. The AK300 too was an exceptionally slim and portable player, but had a good amount of heft to it, and the only thing I didn't like about that was the volume knob off to the side. I kept thinking I was going to break it, but I thought it was a little bit prone to getting knocked around. But in this case, I personally don't think you can compare this one to the AK70, especially the original version. I had that side by side with this, playing exactly the same song set on exactly the same type of SD card, and people say they can't hear the difference. Well, my ears certainly could hear a difference between the AK70 and the AK300 in terms of the sound that came through to my ears. So I found this player also was able to drive my over-ear headphones easier than the AK70 could as well. Couldn't tell a lot of difference on this player between the balanced and the unbalanced output. To be honest, I've heard it on some players, but certainly not on this player. I think it's handy to have the balanced output, but it didn't really seem to provide any additional driving power to the headphones or earphones that I used. Having said that, some people do say that they get a bit of difference. I've tried using line out and through an exterior desktop amplifier. Certainly does play well through that, has a nice clean output. The only thing with this, it's like other Android players, when you first put a new SD card in, it does take a little while to scan up. If I put in a 256 gigabyte player with MP3s on it, say 20,000 songs or something, it's going to take a good 15 minutes before it's scanned it all, at least 15 minutes before it comes and loads them all up. However, you can start playing music off the player well before then. So in terms of user face, you can't compare this to something like the KLXM, which is just sluggish in comparison, some of the older ones. In terms of sound, I mean, I've got if you compare it to something like the Acoustic Research AR-M20 or M2, that has an Android interface with Google, Android 4.3, so very primitive, very basic, Android system, but this is more responsive and intuitive to use in terms of the player interface. But I think in terms of pure sound quality, something like the AR-M20, which you can get for the same price now as one of these, second hand or new, while older, does provide, I think, a better overall sound quality. So, you are paying, I think, Distill and Kern for their resale value and their premium build in terms of pure sound and features. Yeah, something like the Hybie R6 today, which is again a great sounding player, um, very fast, full Google Play, full apps download, streaming, everything fantastically fast. Um, but it that sort of player just doesn't seem to have the musicality to my ears as something like the KLXM, which has been around for so many years. Absolutely atrocious in terms of battery life and slow to start up, but it's just engaging. This player here, the AK300, with the right music, is also very engaging. But to me, it just lacks a little bit of uh, finesse at the high end on some of the flat tracks that I've been listening to, but certainly well underrated player in terms of comparing to some of the other brands, Ibasso, um, Fio, and all the other ones that are competing at this price range. Things like the Onkyo DPX1A and things like that. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. For me, if you want a music player just for music, going for a dedicated music player, you don't need all the extra features unless you need the streaming services. But to me, if you've got an iPhone, you can get all your streaming on that, or an Android phone, and usually you're using them on the move. All the times I've tried the streaming services, I haven't quite found, to my ears, the sound quality as good as a well recorded high-res file on a dedicated playing system, but that's just my opinion. Plenty of people want the convenience of streaming these days, so that's why there's a move in that direction. This player can't stream offline, so if you're using Tidal or Spotify or anything like that, you can only use it online, not offline. So that's a limitation. For me, I tend to just load music on, put it in shuffle, have a few playlists, and just sit back and enjoy the music. I'm not really using it for anything else other than straight listening. So if that's what you need, this is a great player, and this particular one I've just sold because I've got too many players and having to streamline the collection a bit. So now I'm just going to switch it off. You just hold the power button down, switch it off. Okay, shut down. And this player's had minimal use, so lucky new owner's going to get a practically brand new AK300. These are definitely going for a cheap price these days, and well worth it if you can pick one up at a reasonable price. That's just my opinion.